Hey everyone, it's Lynn, Low Carb Traveler, and I'm here with Mr. Mojo, Dorian of Keto Mojo, and this is the device that I use for my glucose and ketone testing, the testing I do on all of the products that we talk about. And this is what I use to test blood glucose and blood ketone levels and to determine how products affect me when I do product reviews for you guys. Anyway, so I'm here at the Metabolic Health Summit in Long Beach, and Dorian, we'll call him Mr. Mojo. We were having a really interesting conversation yesterday because I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had from the Metabolic Health Summit is context. Rob Wolf said in his session yesterday, he was talking about everything has to be taken in context.
Yes.
So the overall context of one person's health or metabolic health or state or whatever is going to be different than someone else's. So whereas we kind of feel like there's hard and fast rules for keto, there's really not.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway from this event is the term you used yesterday.
Bio-individuality.
That, bio-individuality. And so I wanted to just kind of bring him to you and share this conversation we had yesterday and what that means exactly. So just as an example, when I test, my ketone levels are generally, it's going to be like 0.08 or 1.9 is very high for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've seen your test, I pricked his finger. So his test much higher. So, and then your wife was saying that the two of you can both eat the same meal.
Absolutely.
And then you'll have different test results from that meal. So can you explain what is bio-individuality exactly?
Well, there was a famous Israeli study on 840 different respondents, and they gave them a cookie and they gave them a banana, a measured amount of a banana, and everybody had a different response. And then some people would have absolutely opposite glycemic responses. So the main thing is for you to find out what is the bio-individuality for you as an individual and what is your baseline over time. And that baseline can actually change. What
do you mean it can change?
Well,
so using this, right, to find my baseline?
Yeah.
So how do let's start with that. How do I find my baseline?
Great question. So when I was first starting, I generally measured an hour after waking in the morning, still in a fasted state. So what you're doing an hour after waking is allowing for what's known as the dawn phenomenon, which pushes up the cortisol, which gives you a glucose spike. But that then will blow off after the hour, if you will, and then give you a nice baseline for the day. And now if you measure consistently over a period of time, this will give your level. And then from that baseline, you can then work out what is really truly beginning to happen.
So you document this like on paper?
On paper, or you can also, what's pretty cool is...
They just come out with some new app that I found very interesting because, like with my body composition scale, it has an app. So instead of just documenting on paper, you know, what my bone density is, what my muscle mass is,
you can see that on the screen there.
Could you get a little closer, maybe?
I don't have to.
No, I don't know.
Doesn't like the brightness on it, so there we go.
So with the app that they have developed, you can actually better determine a baseline because it puts all of those numbers in as you go, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I haven't started using the app yet, so I'm interested to do that so I can get a feel. So because I've had some issues here while we're traveling and while we're at this event, I've had some issues with my ketone levels.
Right, and so here's the thing is I personally I use my meter when I'm sleuthing out different foods to see how they personally affect me. So I've got my baseline in the morning, and say for instance I'm actually doing a new keto granola on my yogurt that I normally have in the morning. And
I got your granola.
I've
got the best granola.
Okay, so but sometimes they like to put sugar alcohols in it. Mm-hmm. Now, I have found that I would test obviously beforehand, and then I'm going to test my glucose and ketones about an hour after eating. Now, if I've seen a glucose spike of like over 30 points, that's going to be out on me immediately. I want to keep under a 30-point spike ideally. Normally, my blood glucose is between the 70s and 80s, especially when I'm fasted. That's me. 83 is absolutely optimal and perfect. And then if I see, if I'm going over, like, if I'm 105, 110, I don't like to be in that range. So I'm going to say I'm not going to eat that food. But then with sugar alcohols, I might not get a glucose spike, but I suddenly see my ketones coming down when they shouldn't be.
I don't have that problem with sugar alcohol.
Yeah, but
so this is the bio-individuality you're talking about.
Right. So that's why I personally, as much as I see, I have tasted Nui cookies, I have tasted Quest bars, I have tasted like that, but I don't personally eat those anymore because I know what's happening with my response. That I'm basically, those sugar alcohols are eliciting an insulin response, and that insulin response is tampering down my ketone production. So I choose not to do it. And that's just me. I'm a bit quirky in that respect. My wife is different.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've learned a lot about that here at the Metabolic Health Summit. So on Thursday night, which was the opening night, the first day of the event, they served some different foods and low-carb wines even and things like that. And I had some of the Quest pizza, which is a low-carb pizza. And so tested afterwards because I've never tested that food before. And it didn't affect my glucose levels. So I tested 85.
No glycemic response.
Right. So that's my normal. I tested 85. However, it tanked my ketone levels and knocked me out of ketosis. So 0.03, which would be out of ketosis, below 0.05. So how could a food knock me out of ketosis but not affect my blood glucose level?
Because they're either using carbohydrate that is in the form of fiber, like an allulose or something like that. They could also be using sugar alcohols in there. And that's the bio-individuality. I mean, this sort of like, okay, is it 4 grams total? Is it 4 grams net? These things will stack up and add functions. And you can only manage what you measure. And trying to use a rule to the lowest common denominator, to me, doesn't make sense. But here's the thing, it's like, believe it or not, I'm not actually advocating for testing. Because, and I'm going to be a bit weird on this one, when you first start, you get like super curious and you test a lot like that. And then as you test, you learn and you adjust your diet, you test and you learn, until eventually you're like a total pro. And you're like, I don't need to test anymore. And if somebody doesn't need to test anymore, job done, because they're healthy. And this is what we went about doing. If you go and look at the competition, their goal is to get you to test as much as that, and forever. That's what being a diabetic is.
Oh, constant cricket.
Okay, exactly. They want to get you on their strips and their support forever because they want you perpetually sick. Well, we shouldn't be doing that. We want to have healthy, vibrant people who are living really lovely lives.
I like that.
So that's our goal.
Although you probably tested here more than normal, because I asked him, we were both in the same line for the pizza. So he had the pizza too. So when I came back 30 minutes and an hour later to do the testing or whatever, I had his fingerprint too because I wanted to know what his response was.
Right.
Now your response to the pizza was different than mine. You had lower ketone levels, but not out of ketosis.
Right.
There were other people who had the pizza that it didn't affect their ketone levels. So so it's not the food, it's the person and how they respond
the bio-individuality
to that food. So is it an ingredient intolerance? Is it gut health? Like how do we start to determine, okay, so we have the tool, so we know what foods are affecting us individually. So you can't necessarily just go on the internet and say, okay, Quest Pizza knocks so-and-so out of ketosis, so it's going to knock me out of ketosis. Because I've proven here at this event by pricking lots of fingers that that's not the case. So how do we go about finding out, okay, is it a certain ingredient in this product that I need to avoid? Or, like, is it a gut health issue?
As Rob Wolf said, you've got to look at everything. And the context of things change. My wife, Gemma, Mrs. Mojo, was always around about 0.4, 0.3. She was always like, I never get really high on my ketones. I was usually between 1.1 and 1.7 when I'm at home. When I travel, I always seem to go up a little bit. It's usually because I'm fasted all the way through the day and only eat one meal a day. And then after about a year and a half, she changed. And now she's getting higher ketone levels. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the externality here that's changed? Our eating habits are pretty much the same. So did her microbiome change? My wife has been a cancer thriver for these past 5 years. She was knocked out with anti-inflammatories. She was hammered with antibiotics. And maybe her gut flora and her microbiome is coming back. We've moved away from being very close to a vineyard where they were spraying multiple times. So
Interesting.
so when
when you look at all the different factors, external and internal.
Dr. Nasha Winter's Terrain 10, when they go and look at the sunlight, look at that much vitamin D, look at your vegetables, look at like all of the different pieces that come on around. Mm-hmm. And you want to kind of like adjust all of those in your favor to give you the most vibrancy you possibly can.
All right, so your goal with Keto Mojo is to help people figure out what's right and what's wrong with them specifically, individually. So not what food is bad and what food is good, but what's good for you and what works for you. So
I mean, you could have somebody who's working out a huge amount, and lucky for them, they might be able to do 55 grams of carbs a day. You know, that might be a big difference for them, going like, wow, I can have a half a sweet potato with some creme fraiche and cheese on it. Brilliant. But then by another person who looks at that, I'm like, one straight out of ketosis, and then there'll be no hope. So, so what I like with the testing is finding what your carb edge is. Right. I like to think about the edge of where you can stay in ketosis and enjoy the most vibrant of foods. It should be a sensorial experience and delicious and enjoyable. Right. And I think that's what keto is.
One of the things is carrots. People say that's not keto, and that's because it's, for the most part, it's not a hard and fast rule, but underground or root vegetables are off the table, literally, whereas you want above ground vegetables, but that's not a hard and fast rule because, I mean, the vegetable list does have some root vegetables on it. But carrots are, like, in moderation, relatively low in carbs, almost equivalent to berries. However, they are a starchy food, whereas berries are not.
But you gotta eat a whole carrot. And what I mean by this is that if you say to somebody, oh yeah, carrots are okay, you can have them on keto, the next thing you do, they're sticking it in a blender and they're pile driving a huge amount of carrot juice.
No, you can't.
And there's no way I would eat like 10 carrots in one sitting. I might have one carrot and I'll be like, oh, I'm done, because it's bound with the fiber. Once we start processing it and we break that fiber down, then we can shoot huge amounts of it, and now we've got this big glycemic load that is coming into play.
Right. It's the same with berries, though. Like, I literally eat 18 grams of berries versus a cup of berries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in moderation, the carb count is okay. But what the real question I guess I want to get to is, so you determine what you can and can't eat, whether it's products or whether it's a wider range of produce or whatever the case is. But what's the ultimate end goal? So when you're learning these things about yourself, you're using the Keto Mojo, you're doing blood glucose testing, you're doing blood ketone testing, you're figuring out what your baselines are, what you can tolerate, what you can't. So in a situation like mine, which you've pricked my finger a lot this weekend, so you know that I'm extremely sensitive to certain products or certain ingredients or whatever. So what is my next step? Is this some kind of, there's genome testing, biome testing? What is my next step in determining what ingredient is causing the problem I'm having?
So it's really, if you have a particular dish with an ingredient in it, or you minimize the number of ingredients in it, and then you test and you learn which one goes, it's either by removing it or adding it in.
Right.
That's the
process
first
of elimination.
It's the process of elimination that comes into play. I find that, and then after a period of time, it's learning and adjusting. Measurement is the first step that leads to control. Once you can control something, you can improve upon it. And measurement actually gives you freedom. Like, I love Indian food. I grew up in England. It's like the best thing. And, but how are you going to go and tell us the chef what are all the ingredients that they've got in that one there?
Right.
And so what I love going out to our local Indian, we pretty much choose the same dishes every time. They now know not to bring us the rice. They know there's no naan bread or doshas or anything like that. And we test after the meal, and we test the next morning, and we're golden. So you get this freedom to go out to restaurants. My wife's a sommelier, and so what she likes to do is push the edges of the wines. So we're producing wines from the Loire Valley, or maybe from Northern Rhone, or maybe a really nice Clément d'Alsace that's like a brut nature. We know that there's not enough sugar in that. And so now we can enjoy these different wines and know how to order off a list.
Right.
So this makes it just more vibrant, more enjoyable, and it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, and it's great.
So then the first step then, through using the Keto Mojo and testing and determining, like, oh, that knocked me out of ketosis, or that affected me personally, is to then try to identify which ingredient by the process of elimination.
Precisely.
But what if it's not an ingredient issue, and maybe it's a meat issue? Like, is it possible that we can have health issues that are causing certain foods to respond? Like, I'm concerned, or not concerned, maybe interested very much in gut health, and this is following, some of you know from following my story, a couple of years ago I had 3 rounds of antibiotics and 2 rounds of steroids in a very short period, in a 2-week period. And ever since then, my body is just not responding the same way. So is it that point that people throw their hands up and say, keto doesn't work for me anymore? But I think what we're looking at here in a case like that is gut health.
Yes.
And so a lot of people will just kind of jump all in and say, go carnivore, which is a total elimination diet, or go dairy free or whatever. But how do you determine what you need to do rather than just guessing and jumping into something trendy?
I think with that one, you need to go to sometimes see an expert. Gracie Liu is the expert in my mind in gut microbiome. I'm beginning to learn more about that. I'm personally a keen gardener, and I do my garden in the French intensive method, and I make my own compost teas. And they're done, and this was done by Professor Ingram at UC Davis. I take a handful of my hot compost, a handful of my cold compost, a handful of my worm compost, stick it in a net, shove that in a bucket, and then I have a big bubbling machine that puts it in aerobic nature, a little bit of blackstrap molasses and a teaspoon of citric acid, and I bubble this out for 24 to 48 hours, and I get this big mycorrhizal bloom, I get this big fungal bloom, and this big bacterial bloom of good bacteria, and I add it as a foliar feed to my tomatoes and to my soil.
Very interesting.
And my tomatoes, the cages for them is 7-foot tall concrete reinforcing wire, and they top it by 3 feet every year.
Wow.
If I can do that in the soil, imagine what we are perhaps not doing to our bodies. And this is the next frontier, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know enough about it, and I need to do more learning about it, but I really think my gut microbiome is really important. When Gemma had that fundamental change of not having high ketones, from having the 0.3s, 0.4s, and suddenly getting in the 1s and 2s, some externality happened.
Yes.
We don't yet know what that is, and that to me is a bit of excitement. It's the next frontier to be explored. And Grace and I have sat down for many chats, and we're thinking of working out a way of actually doing some kind of testing methodology, where you can go out and do a gut microbiome test, then take a look at ancestral microbiome, and then have perhaps a data set which can kind of like show if you're going in the optimal direction. And this is new, kind of like really cutting edge. It's going to take me a while to get there because we have federal regulations to deal with, as always. But I think it'll be kind of cool.
Right.
But I can't give a definitive on that. We need more data.
Well, and data is good because otherwise you're just guessing. And that's one of the reasons I absolutely love using the Keto Mojo. It has really helped me to eliminate some foods from that I thought looked good on paper, smelled good, tasted good, you know. So it's helped me to eliminate some foods from my diet that didn't do well with me. The interesting thing too is I think it depends a lot on how far you are into your journey.
Right.
So for me in the very beginning, all of this kind of stuff wasn't super important because I ate so badly, not knowing any better. And then when I went keto, which 8 years ago was basically Atkins phase 1, 20 net carbs max, 70% fat minimum, even eating things like Atkins bars and Quest bars and sugar-free candy by the bag. I mean, even eating like that, I lost 8 pounds in 10 days, and I lost 23 pounds in the first 7 weeks.
Right.
And all of a sudden, that's when I experienced ketosis, I finally, and got out of pain. And so, fast forward 8 years, and it's no longer just about weight loss, but I eat so much cleaner now.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you'll see that I eat mono meals, like a handful of pecans or just eggs, or 3 ingredients max, the 3I max method, or what have you. And so I'm so much more aware of how I feel. Whereas before, if I had a headache or if my stomach was off, that was kind of my daily norm.
Yeah. They talk about the keto clarity. The fog lifts. And people who are not keto we can talk to this until we're blue in the face, but until you experience it for that first like aha moment, and it was great. Dr. Chris Palmer, he's a psychiatrist at Harvard. He asked how many people in the room had that, and the whole room shot its hands up. And that's the beauty of keto. But for some people, having too much ketones, and especially for people who have serious mental disorders, hypomania can then become a very real problem. The next thing they can sometimes do is drop, $50,000 on a trip that they don't have the money for. So this is a very important kind of thing to take into context that for most people, a ketogenic diet is very effective, it's very, very safe, but there are for some people that will definitely need doctor supervision or the need of a coach to help them through and to guide them so that they do it right. And there are a very small subset of the population that have genetic SNPs that they are not predisposed for keto. And so, I'm also an advocate that people should, if they're really, that something's not working, something's not right, and they're in this plateau, or something like that, get your genome done. Genome testing, genome is a good one, and they can look through and see which SNPs are there that could be causing a problem. The cool thing is sometimes with genome testing now is that we can also find out that some pharmacological drugs aren't good for people. And there are some pharmacological companies that are buying these genome testing people to remove that data so people don't know.
Interesting. Very interesting. So one last question. I'm curious, so generally speaking, my ranges are relatively low.
Right.
I would say 0.08 to 1.2 or 1.9 is high for me. Whereas I noticed yours are dramatically higher. And your wife said that, Mrs. Mojo, she said that hers are generally lower than yours or were for a period of time. So is it kind of like being pregnant, you are or you're not, like in ketosis? And the information I've read is the variables there are too many variables to know whether, let's say you have an athlete that consistently reads 0.05.
Right.
Right? And then you have a sedentary housewife who consistently reads 2.5. Which is better or why?
So what we do is we're measuring what is in the tank. We don't measure how well your liver can produce ketones or how metabolically adapted you are at receiving those ketones for energy.
Okay.
So like Luis Bilzenor and Tyler Cartwright of Keto Gains, they say don't go chasing ketones, chase results. And Luis was talking about the fact that he always had low ketones. He was an athlete. But he was using those ketones. Of course they're going to be low. His muscles are adapted to say, give me ketones. And dude, it's just stats. He's got big muscles.
Right.
So that's his bio-individuality. Mm-hmm. Then there is the housewife who said she has a 2.5, she's sedentary. Well, guess what? She could be in a good state of ketosis. She could be pushing out of a lot of ketones, but yet her mitochondria haven't changed at that cellular level to be able to receive it. But that will adjust over time.
Okay.
And then you have with Gemma, always low, then something changed, and she gets more.
So does the amount of time you've been in ketosis consistently affect that? Is it true what they say, that your body becomes more efficient at producing and using ketones? Or
on the data set that I've seen so far, I still say the jury's out on that.
Okay.
That's why we partnered with Dave Krasinski of Heads Up Health to really try to start plotting this data over larger cohorts and really get a true understanding that is there. Right now, it's sort of like anecdotal science, and in that we've all seen the results of poor epidemiological studies that come on out, and people make a correlation
right.
that is absolutely untrue. I think there was one recently that came out either in the Eat Lancet or the Harvard. And they said, that people with low-carb diets, and they actually put the word ketogenic in there, had more of a problem with associated with death. Well, when you actually dug into the study, these people were smokers, they were male, and they were having more than 90 grams of carbs a day. Well, that ain't ketogenic, so what they labeled it the same, and it made a great clickbait on the headline.
Exactly.
So this is the problem of the disinformation that you're getting out there. You've got to really kind of look in and make sure you're getting your sources right. And I think on that aspect of what you're saying is we need more data to really truly science, to see the science on that and see all of the things that are going on in those people's lives.
Right. And I think the most important thing for me and the biggest takeaway from this event and from talking with Dorian and Mrs. Mojo while I've been here is the bio-individuality factor and the fact that we are all unique and individual, that it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, that every product or every ingredient is the same for everyone. So when people say, oh, artificial sweeteners will knock you out of ketosis, they will for him and they won't for me. And
John has a question.
And that's perfectly okay. Yeah, John says, so are the ketones you can buy to increase your ketone level bogus? Now, that's a really good question, and that's
it's a loaded
something...
one.
It's a loaded question. There are actually 3 vendors here at the event selling exogenous ketones, and I don't know that I've asked you your take on this yet. So I actually talked with Kim of Completely Keto. We were talking about that. We were having lunch together today. I've never taken them. I've never taken ketones because I can easily eat real food and get in ketosis, right? It takes me longer, by the way, to get in ketosis than it does other people. So when some people get knocked out of ketosis, they're back in within a few hours or within the day. It takes me to day 3. End of day 2, 33, 48 hours maybe. So that's another bio-individuality thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
right.
I'm neutral on the subject of exogenous ketones. I'm going to be very Swiss here, and because it's all about the application and use of them. Now you can buy I'm not going to mention the brand. You can buy a $4 sachet of exogenous ketones, and you'll probably get a 1 to a 1.5 millimole rise on your ketone level that can be measured within the blood. Now, that's great, but what if your mitochondria in your body's not ready to receive that? Then you're just going to have expensive pee in that respect.
Expensive pee. I like that.
And so that's one
so
aspect.
Is that a vanity thing, though? Like, it's not just about how high can I get my number.
Yeah.
I will just say, too, that what's the point of taking them? So a lot of times they are advertised as have your cake and eat it too, and then take the exogenous ketones to get back in ketosis. The thing you need to know is it doesn't put you back in ketosis like nutritional ketosis.
Right.
It is a very temporary effect. So it's more like
only about 1 to 2 hours.
To me, it's similar to drinking an energy drink.
Yeah.
In which case I would liken it to drugs on the legal level.
So it will actually increase your ketone levels, and if you have a degree of metabolic flexibility, you'll definitely could be able to use that. But on the flip side to it, if you're already fat adapted in a state of nutritional ketosis, you can take an MCT oil, a CA, caprylic acid, and 1 ounce shot of that costs about 32 cents versus a $4 sachet of exogenous ketones. And you'll get a nearly 1.5 to 2 millimole rise from using a CA MCT oil. Now, there's another piece that's exogenous ketones, I think there's going to be some new data set that's going to come out on it that'll have a use and efficacy. Say, for instance, an Alzheimer's patient. It's really hard to get people who are set in their way to change their minds. But what if you can give them an exogenous drink and that person has better lucidity because of it?
That's
an application and use of it.
So people who are doing the keto diet, like for nutritional ketosis, for weight loss or whatever, I don't think there's necessarily a place for it. But now, for therapeutic reasons, so cancer patients or trauma patients, that exogenous ketones can help them recover faster in certain situations.
Yep. I've seen it used as a bridge. Like some people who have really bad keto flu and they haven't been able to get in to get fully into nutritional ketosis, like say for instance a pilot, they have to fly a mission, or a mother, she's got to look after her kids, she needs to fly a mission. Then yes, you can use that bridge for maybe 2-3 days, just so that you give your time for your liver to do what it needs to do and ramp on up. And then if you're looking for weight loss, I don't think it has value. But if you're looking for...
but for Alzheimer's patients, dementia patients, cancer patients, trauma patients...
sports people for an energy drink.
Sports people for an energy drink.
Recovery.
But it is a short-term effect. So it's very much like drinking an energy drink or taking an energy shot. It's not going to put you in nutritional ketosis. It is not the same thing.
Yeah.
So that was a really good point. There's one last question, and I know you have to get back upstairs, and so do I. But one last question, and you're going to love this one. So we want to know why is Keto Mojo, and this is coming from someone in my group, they really want to know, why is Keto Mojo better than Precision Extra?
Good question.
Or how do they compare?
So how do we compare? For our ketone measurement, we are good, or if not better, than the Precision Extra.
It's not working.
And so that's number one. Number two is our glucose measurement is much better than the Precision Extra. Precision Extra,
more accurate?
Yeah, Precision Extra uses an older enzyme called a GOD enzyme, glucose oxidase dehydrogenase, and we use an FAD GDH enzyme, which is the second generation, and that is after that. Also, we're the first meter in the world that will connect via Bluetooth, that you can get the data to your phone and then to apps like Heads Up Health. We have a lifetime warranty on our product that no other meter in the world has a lifetime warranty. You know, like if there's anything wrong with that, I'm going to replace it. I have a kick-ass customer service team who are all ketogenic. And last but not least, we're setting up a foundation, and we'll be putting our profits into that foundation to support clinical trials and studies in the efficacy and use of ketogenic therapies to advance the optimized nature of mankind. So you can either give your money to a large Fortune 500 company that has been raping ketonians for the last 10 years and charging them $10 a strip and then $4 a strip, or you can support Mr. and Mrs. Mojo, whose own main mission was to lower the cost. And I think it's absolutely great that we had a market forcing function, and now we're having people buy strips in Australia, ship them over because the Australian government subsidizes strips in Australia, and now selling to Americans so they can match our price. But what you have then is a product that's flown across Albania that you have no idea on the provenance of those strips, because we bring our product in temperature-controlled containers. They go to a temperature-controlled warehouse to ensure that they are always optimum before we then ship them out to the customers. Because
they are temperature sensitive, and a lot of people don't realize that that even with like the urine strips, buying those and getting them from overseas, and you may not know what the original source is, or so knowing the source is very important.
Once you pop the top of urine analysis strips, and most people don't know this, you buy 150 of them and you pop the top of it. It's like leaving the top of a set of Pringles. They're all going to go soggy and yucky because they will only work for 30 minutes.
I'm kidding.
Oh yeah, Traeger Foods. Sorry, back in the day. I was just remembering the commercial.
I remember that.
They'll only work for 30 days. So hold on, even if you got a thing that'll only work for 30 days anyway. And it might not even actually work, because what we're doing is you're measuring a spilled ketone, and that spilled ketone represents big hydroxybutyric rate represents 70% of the energy that's available in the body. Then you have acetoacetate and acetone, and they roughly represent 15% and 15%. So you're now trying to measure spilled ketones of the smallest amount and the smallest of trace. And then after a while, if you're in state of ketosis, you're not going to spill those ketones anymore, so they become useless.
Well, while we're on that topic, this really is the one last question. So a lot of people think the darker they pee on the strip and the darker purple it is, or the higher your number on your Keto Mojo or whatever blood ketone device you use, it's almost like an ego thing or bragging rights.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter, does it?
Higher is definitely not necessarily better unless you're looking at ketones for a cancer therapy, and then you really want to take a good hard look at your TKI on that one there. So then that does become important.
I'm talking for the general public who are doing the quote-unquote keto diet.
As long as you're in the zone.
You are or you aren't.
Yes, I've been pregnant. Right. Pretty much in that way. So it's the application.
Which neither of us are.
No, not that I found, no. Did you want to get Chris?
Let's see. Chris says, what do you think about collagen protein? Does it help the body build muscle and burn fat? I don't know if that's our expertise. What do you think?
Well, I do like collagen. I have it in my coffee every morning. I do collagen, ghee, coconut oil, and heavy cream.
Collagen's good for you in so many ways. It's a great product, but does it help the body build muscle and burn fat?
I think for building muscle, I think good quality amino acids made through fermentation by a bovine is probably the best way to go. And what I mean by grass-fed meat, I'm going to go for that one. Sorry for all you vegetarians. But I think that's the most nutrient-dense food that is in the world. So certainly if you want to build muscle, you can eat some protein, but you've really got to go down the gym and lift.
Lifting, right.
So, like, just you cannot eat your way big. Well, you can if you're using carbs, but you're not going to get muscle.
I did that once. It does work.
And in fat burning, to be fat burning, you need to be in a state of nutritional ketosis.
And you can do that with or without collagen, although collagen is a great thing, especially, I would say, after a certain age.
And I also think that for if we're just talking the weight loss subject here, there is an aspect of caloric deficit that needs to come on in. If you are bringing in ketones in a large amount and eating lots of fat, then you're not actually going to be burning some of your dietary, of your bodily fats. So I think there does need to be a slight caloric deficit here. And slow and steady wins this race. I mean, for me, it took me 6 months to go from 207 pounds down to my fighting weight was 165. I now hover about 170, 175, which is there. I don't actually weigh myself, except when I go down about once a month to the pharmacy, and then I jump on the scales there, and I'm like, oh, that's good, and that's about it. I don't fixate on weight. It's body composition. It's non-scale victories.
Right.
I think the selfie is like the best tool. Take that selfie, take it over time, and then you suddenly look back on the pictures because you're so used to seeing your face in the mirror every morning. But
you don't
when you
see the change.
Exactly.
In the mirror, you don't see the change. In fact, the interesting thing is let's say, 60, 70 pounds ago, that's who I still see when I look in the mirror. But I put two pictures side by side.
Yeah.
And it's a very big contrast. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for the great questions, by the way. I found the bioindividuality aspect of this very interesting because there are a lot of people out there that say, what works for you or if it works for you is a bad way to go, but really it's the only way to go. And there are a lot of people who are preaching that, and really preaching keto and saying it's this way and no other way, it has to be like this. But the fact that if it works for you is basically that you need to test and you need to know or test certain foods and see what your response is to those and know what does work for you.
And get as many data points as you can.
Right.
Measure your biceps, measure your waist, measure where your belly line is there. Maybe get the DEXA scan that comes on to doing that. Look at your glucose, look at your ketones that's coming in. Track your macros. Chronometer's a great product. I love that. I'm also a big fan of Heads Up Health because you can pull all of these data sets in together and your Oura Ring.
So this Heads Up Health, which it syncs with Keto Mojo.
Yeah.
Does it also sync with MyFitnessPal?
Yeah. And Oura Ring and with Chronometer, Strava, Garmin. I mean, the list of integrations is massively long. You can bring in 20,000 different doctor and institutions in America and your LabCorp and your Quest Diagnostics. It's killer software.
All right, I'm in.
All right.
Very cool. Okay, good stuff. You guys have a great rest of the day or night, and I've got to get back up to the Metabolic Health Summit. Yes, just finally.
I know, California.
All right, have a good one.
Bye.